Today we are with Dr. Aseni Wickramatillake, who is working on occupational health and also toxins in the environment and the toxins in the food and things like that. So we know as a general public that there is big problem in Sri Lanka, especially in the food and also in the environment and in also water. We get some of the toxins, and some of those toxicants are really having big impact on the population and also the future generation. So we would like to hear from Dr. Aseni, and what is the consequences of this toxin in our and also our food, and how does it to our body?
Okay, so now when we talk about toxins, mainly we are talking about chemicals. Chemicals, there are different types of chemicals out there, and every time we are also having man-made, a lot of man-made chemicals increasing in the environment and in our daily use. So these chemicals, there are three main ways that chemicals can get into our body. That is through the inhalation, that is the breathing system. And that is one of the most common ways we can get chemicals into our body. And then another way is through the skin, absorption through the skin. And the third important way is through our gastrointestinal system, that is through our eating, through our food pipe. There are also other ways where chemicals can pass down through the breast milk, through from mother to the fetus, and through injection. So there are many other ways as well. So these are the ways that chemicals get into our body, and once the chemicals are in our body, they're biotransformed. Either the chemical toxins are increased or decreased, and some of them are actually stored in the body for longer periods. They may be stored in the fat cells, they may be stored in our bones, they may be stored in many parts of our body, and they may stay in our body for longer durations than we actually realize. And some of these chemicals actually are excreted out through our kidney system, and during this excretion also it can cause toxicity to the excretory organs. And when it's processed in the liver, it can even cause toxicity to the liver as well.
Yeah, doctor, now these the kidney disease mainly and also thalassemia and also the cancer are mainly in the dry zone. So is there any correlation for that?
So dry zone, it is also believed that the water in the dry zone is contaminated through the hill country pollutants or the fertilizer that is used. One way of contamination. Then another way of contamination is the farming community itself, because now farming community are considered as informal workers. The man, the woman, and the children and the close relatives all are involved in this farming, so they're actually working. So even children are considered workers and exposed to all these chemical hazards while they spray, while they handle, while they mix these chemicals. And it can get on to that because they don't use any protective equipment or anything. So it just gets absorbed through the skin. They may inhale it, and also it might get into through their digestive system, because once they use these chemicals on the food to produce in the agricultural products, it can biomagnify and get into the food system.
So then, doctor, now you mean to say that the normally as general public we believe that normally this toxicant can get into your body through the food, but now you are saying that it can be come by working in the fields like spraying and inhaling and also touching, because the children sometimes they don't know that they are so harmful and it can be absorbed through the skin. The situation is like aggravated or magnified in that kind of a situation in the field.
Yes, because now they are getting doses from multiple areas. So obviously the amount, the dose, I mean, in the 1400, a great scientist said dose makes the poison. So now if we are putting a lot of dose into the body, so the harm is increased, it's magnified. So now in multiple ways, the farming community, they get, all these toxins in multiple ways, not through food as well as by handling them.
Doctor, now as a medical doctor, do you see the symptoms and you see any kind of the scenario of like side effects or symptoms are happening and what kind of things can be observed in the field?
Okay, so now if I talk about the technical aspect, now say chemicals like fertilizers like glyphosate chemical, which is heavily used in the upcountry tea industry and other industries. So this glyphosate is now believed to alter the protein synthesis, right? And when that is altered, the other chemicals like say lead, cadmium, arsen, chromium, that is also in some of these fertilizers and weedicides and all these pesticides, they all actually cause a synergistic effect. So they add on to the effects of the other chemicals, the other harm, and they magnify the toxicity.
Right. Doctor, now also, yeah, like, in the government health sector, especially for dengue and also malaria and all that, we are using so much of chemicals. Sometimes uninvitedly, the municipal council, the people comes and they want to spray. So what is the consequences of that? Because we are not aware the toxicity and the toxicant in it.
That's a very good question because it can, it takes a small dose to kill a mosquito or a fly or whatever. But if we are continuously exposed, right, we also get a relatively larger dose because the duration and the frequency of exposure. So due to this duration and frequency, we may get a larger dose, and then that can cause harm. So the mechanism, it will kill the mosquito or a fly or an insect. In the similar mechanism, it can cause harm to us. So it may cause neurological damage or any other organ damage on the long term, or it can cause chronic ill health.
Doctor, now also I think that you have been doing some research or some studies and reviews on this particular problem with toxicants in our system. And has there is any good research has been done, or what is your feeling? I mean, as a Sri Lanka, have we done enough research, and can we point out from the research data that this problem is really alarming and it can affect the population? And also, or else you think that the research are not enough, and how, which area has to be studied more?
Okay. So the research is done in multiple levels, but there is no proper cumulative research that is done, and some of these methodologies in research and all are not done properly. So they come out as reports, and we have very few actual internationally published research articles on this. We have ad hocly done a lot of local research with sometimes when you look at those articles and papers, the methodology may be a little bit, not so great. So now I think we have enough, not just in our country, even in South America, they are having this problem. So we have enough data to say that most of these weedicides, pesticides, all synergistically, cause significant health harm, not only to the current generations, but because most of these chemicals, if you take glyphosate in 2015 was considered as a probable carcinogen by the International Agency for Cancer Research. And then chemicals like lead, cadmium, and arsen, they are also known to be probable carcinogens. They also cause gene mutations, and they are also reproductive toxins. These chemicals not only can cause harm to the current generation, but to the future generations as well, to the unborn child, to the newborns. It can cause stunting, it can cause neurological damage, it can cause other organ damage. So we may have children who, the minds are not well developed. So our society itself in future may have an impact on this. And I think now we have to look at, in the research, we have to put all the research that has been done, bring it together, do a complete review, and exactly understand what we have achieved so far and what needs to be done, because I feel we need to actually quantify the amounts, the dosages in the rice, in the yams, in the vegetables, And we should not forget, even in the water, sometimes the dose may be less, but especially in agriculture, where in the rice paddy, where large amounts of water is used, it can magnify. Biomagnification is there in a grain of rice. And also we should not forget, over the years, the sedimentation of these chemicals, because sometimes these chemicals are not destroyed in the environment. They stay on. And so the accumulation of bioaccumulation of all these harmful chemicals can cause further increased dosage, future farming, in the future, in the fields, in the future farming.
Doctor, also that you also come from the area of occupational health and the prevention more than the cure. When certain chemicals or like fertilizer, whatever is imported to Sri Lanka, is there is a way to determine the toxicity and also the usage, how to use it and safe use and things like that. And you think that it is, do we have enough data on the, like, there should be in the labels. So what is your feeling about it?
Yes, now that is a big problem, because chemicals, when chemicals are brought in, or when somebody is using chemicals, there's a thing called a safety data sheet that has all the details, how harmful it is to health, what are the research done, are there animal studies, are there human studies, what is the toxicology data, and what is the ecological data, how does it impact the ecology. So all these things should be in a safety data sheet. And I also work in the manufacturing sector, which also uses a lot of chemicals, and the other is the agricultural sector. And labeling is very poor. Sometimes the label doesn't say the actual contents and the health effects of it. The safety data sheet sometimes says no research is done or no data available. So it also depends on where we are bringing in these chemicals, because from European countries, of course, the safety data sheet is very good. It's very thorough, because they have regulations, they have restrictions on import, export of chemicals. So we need to be aware. Organizations, agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector, we all need to be aware of the hazards of chemicals, and also whether these chemicals are contaminated with other harmful chemicals. So that is another area we don't look into, because if we are, the quality of the chemicals that we are importing, if we have residual other toxicants, other heavy metals in these chemicals, it does not only cause the harm that is indicated on the safety data sheet, but it may have a synergistic additive effect. And the harm may be so much magnified because of all these chemicals causing harm at the same time to our body and the ecosystem.
Okay, doctor, now like in the dry zone, there is two major issues. One is CKDU, that the chronic kidney disease, to unknown eternity, and also the thalassemia. So according to some scientists, these two things are two different things, but some still says that it is the same thing, because the most of the symptoms and effects are very similar. What is your explanation on the thalassemia? And also, because the thalassemia, we believe as a general public that it's a genetic thing. It's come from the generation to generation. So, and you mentioned at one time the things like glyphosate or other heavy metals can alter the genetics of the genes. So it's even though it is directly connected to the heavy metals, but it seems like it's a thalassemia because it can transfer from the generation to generation. Can you just enlighten us on that a little bit?
Okay, so I'm no expert on blood disorders or thalassemia, but what I can say is, over time, all these, gene mutations, so genetic mutations may take 1, 2, 3 generations sometimes, right? So the mutated gene may be in the parents, or the gene mutation might happen while the child is in the, during fertility. And then what happens is they may mimic or certain other conditions because of this mutated gene. So we haven't well understood that aspect, how these chemicals, especially like I said, the carcinogens, the mutagens, and the reproductive toxins, how they over a period of time, how they're going to alter the genetics and cause diseases similar to genetic disorders.
Okay. Now, doctor, it seems like the situation is very dangerous and situation is very bad, because we know now, like for example, Girandurukotte and all that area, the population in a certain GN divisions are about 5,000, but about 3,500 people are having the kidney disease and they are getting the benefits. And on the other hand, it is something very that we cannot reason out, because at a very later stage you detect the kidney disease, and sometimes even though we say that 3,500 people are having the kidney disease, there may be more people who is not detected. So, and also we know as a general public, cancer wards are getting bigger, and the data, and we hear from our relatives and our friends, and every day we hear somebody from the family are getting cancer or kidney disease. So as far as the Sri Lanka concerned, this is a very, very big problem. So from the medical perspective, what is your suggestion? How can we go about it? Because now we have a new government, we wanted to direct them on a right way. And because for us now, talking about this and hearing the information from the researchers and doctors, and this has to be stopped, because otherwise there will be a huge impact on the civilization. So what is your suggestion? I mean, if you can give us some suggestion, how do we approach this problem, and to bring the information to the relevant authorities and the health department, the government, uh, and also agriculture department, because these are interconnected. What is your advice to us? Because we bring this message to general public, but beyond that, how should we tackle this ironic problem?
Yeah, so the first and foremost is all these different stakeholders need to understand the problem, and also the public, the community, the people who are affected, the people who are handling these chemicals and who are affected by this also needs to be educated, and awareness should be created on the potential harms as well as the proper usages, and like I said, dose. So sometimes what happens is these people think more is better, so they use more chemicals, more fertilizer, more weedicide, but they don't understand that the toxicity also worsens. So that is one. And of course, in Sri Lanka, our healthcare system is hugely under strain because of this kidney disease and chronic diseases, which are so much easier and low cost to prevent. We always, because of the late diagnosis and all these things, we try to treat it, and hemodialysis is a very costly affair, and majority of these people at a late stage require hemodialysis. So at an early stage, if we identify, we can prevent it. So identification again, now in occupational health industry, what I have seen is the exposure history is not taken. People ask for the when patients are diagnosed, they mostly go on the symptoms. The environmental exposures, the occupational exposure histories are not taken. So if you actually consider what people are exposed to, sometimes the diagnosis is much easier, or we may get a better diagnosis. So, and majority of these, even cancers, even respiratory diseases, even kidney diseases, we say it's of an unknown etiology. But some of these, if we dig deep in our histories, when we take the history, we might be able to find what the cause is. So the government needs to understand that they can reduce their healthcare costs if they go into a preventative system. So in occupational health, we say there are main, it's a pyramid of control. It's called a hierarchy of controls. So the best is elimination of a harmful substance. So if you can't eliminate the think the next best thing is to substitute it with a less toxic substance. So those are things that people need to consider initially, because it doesn't matter then who uses it, the toxin level we have drastically reduced. Then we have to go into certain engineering controls, like how do we clean up the water systems, how we clean up the soil systems, the silts, the residues that are contaminated. Right? Then we go into workplace practices. How now sometimes the direction of the wind, the flooding and all those can also have effects on the people who are farming. So we need to understand, we need to tell them the best practices when handling chemicals, or in farming, how to use the chemicals, and to maybe use a mixed method, because and lastly, the use of personal protective equipment like a mask, like gloves, like boots, like proper clothing. But again, these, if you don't wear a proper mask suitable for that chemical, you may have a false sense of security that I'm protected, but whereas you're actually not protected. Then that may increase the exposure, and even the types of gloves, all those things you need to understand, but that they only protect one single individual, and they may be in costly affairs. So the government has to look at this, the higher levels of control measures, which it has power. So like I said, when you bring in chemicals, or when you manufacture chemicals, we need to have good quality chemicals with less hazardous substances.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think now it's clear the problem, and also that we are in line with your explanation that we can actually take some precautions, and we can go forward. And I think you very clearly explain how do we tackle this problem into the future. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.